Welcome back to another episode of Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth. The podcast where family legends meet the cold, hard truth and sometimes end up in 7 feet of water, gasping for air. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and today we're diving, quite literally, back to the summer of 1974, Phoenix, Arizona. A time of water shortages, endangered swimming pools, and even more endangered younger brothers. Now, I want you to picture it's 1974. No video games, no cable TV, no internet, no TikTok to document your questionable life choices. Just pure, unfiltered sibling chaos under the blazing Arizona sun. Kids back then had 2 options for entertainment: athletic endeavors or laying in the shade like lizards, contemplating their existence. And we Smith brothers, we chose the communal swimming pool at our trailer park, which, I should mention, was located in a neighborhood we considered one step up from a demilitarized zone. Let me set the scene. Summer in Phoenix is hot. I'm talking surface of the sun hot. Swimming pools weren't just recreational, they were survival equipment. In 1974, though, pools were endangered due to the water shortage in Arizona, which made ours all the more precious and all the more dangerous. The cast of characters. Allow me to introduce the players in today's aquatic drama. Yours truly, age 16, 6 feet tall, the only one who could actually swim, and according to family legend and eyewitness testimony, a known prankster with what my mother would call the devil in him. Jeff, almost 15, my younger brother who, despite all evidence to the contrary, insisted he could swim. Rick and Randy, the almost 12-year-old twins, witnesses to everything. Future canaries who would sing to mom at the slightest provocation. Kyle, age 3, wisely kept away from the 4 of us by parents who knew better. And our mom, the enforcer, the judge, the jury, the one person more terrifying than drowning. And the scene of the crime. Every single summer day, the pattern was the same. My brothers would congregate in the shallow end like a support group for the swimming challenged. Meanwhile, I'd be in the deep end, having the time of my life, alone. 7 feet of water was the great divide of 1974. But as summer wore on, my brothers got bold. They developed what I can only describe as a technique. Let me explain. They'd crawl along the wall from the shallow end to the deep end, hand over hand, like tiny mountain climbers on a horizontal cliff. Then they'd kick themselves off the wall and drift back to safety in the shallow end. Jeff was particularly proud of this maneuver. He called it swimming. I, with all the wisdom of my 16 years, I called it cheating. Time after time, I'd watch this happen. Jeff would meander his way from the shallow end to the deep end, hand over hand along that wall, then kick off and float back like a human pool noodle. And every single time he would proclaim, "See, I can swim." Now, dear listeners, I want you to understand something about a 16-year-old me. I had what you might call an impulsive decision-making process, which is a fancy way of saying I didn't think things through. So, as I watched Jeff perform his wall kick float routine for the umpteenth time, a thought occurred to me. A terrible, absolutely misguided thought. I should test this by grabbing his leg. There Jeff went, crawling along the wall to the deep end. Kick, float, drift. And that's when I struck. As Jeff floated by me in 7 feet of water, I reached out and grabbed his leg. Well, it turns out Jeff could not, in fact, swim. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. Jeff started sinking, and thrashing, and yelling, and gasping. He was flailing his arms like a bird caught in a snare, which, by the way, makes it incredibly challenging to rescue someone when they're windmilling you like a drowning helicopter. But here's where my 6-foot height came in handy. After getting what I'll generously call a good grip while Jeff tried to simultaneously drown me and save himself, I managed to throw him to safety in the shallow end. And looking back almost 52 years later, I can tell you this: it could have been a tragic accident. The mental wounds are still raw. My devilish nature as a kid had finally gone too far. It was a risky prank, and we were fortunate. No, we were protected by Providence, that no one was hurt. Time and time again, the Almighty protected us Smith boys. He protected me from my own ignorance, my own stupidity, my own 16-year-old brain that thought grabbing a non-swimmer in the deep end was a legitimate scientific experiment. But the real terror hadn't even begun yet. Because Jeff, soaking wet, traumatized, and righteously indignant, ran straight to our trailer to deploy the most terrifying weapon in any younger sibling's arsenal. I'm telling Mom. I stayed in the pool, in the deep end, because I may have been stupid, but I wasn't that stupid. Within seconds, and I mean seconds, Mom came charging toward the pool like a heat-seeking missile. Behind her, Jeff, and his 2 star witnesses, Rick and Randy, who sang like canaries at a mob trial. They spilled everything. Mom ordered me out of the pool. I respectfully declined. I had done the math. Mom couldn't swim, and I wasn't about to be my own executioner. I knew Jeff wasn't coming back in to get me. He just spent the last 5 minutes convinced he was meeting his maker. And Mom, well, she could stand at the edge all she wanted, but I had a strategic advantage. That advantage was 7 feet of chlorinated water. So there we were, a standoff. High noon at the trailer park swimming pool. Mom on the deck furious. Me in the deep end, treading water and treading on thin ice. My brothers safely in the shallow end, watching what would become the stuff of family legend. Looking back over 50 years later, I can't fully explain my renegade behavior of a 16-year-old who thought all this was a good idea. Now, I want to assure you, dear listeners, and more importantly, my brothers, if you're listening, I'd lost a lot of those devilish ways. Not all of them, mind you. My wife Patty can verify that I'm still fun-loving and still a prankster today, but not to the level of the 1970s Smith Brother chaos. Mom did her best to beat it out of me, literally and figuratively. But my brothers can say they made it through. They survived. That old saying, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, turns out it's true. My brothers are some of the strongest people mentally that I know, and they live to tell their grandchildren. Now, whether those grandchildren believe those incredible yet true stories, I don't know. Jeff's grandchildren have asked me many times, why were you such a prankster with our grandpa? And honestly, I can only shrug and plead innocence. I really don't know. I guess deep down, I wanted to be an only child. So, dear listeners, what have we learned today? The myth says I was a fearless water warrior, teaching my brothers valuable life lessons about swimming and survival. The Smith reality reveals I was a 16-year-old menace who nearly drowned his brother to prove a point, then used aquatic geography as a defensive strategy against maternal justice. Was Jeff swimming that day? Technically, no. He was performing strategic floating with wall assistance. Was I justified in my experimental mythology? Absolutely not. Did God protect us from my teenage stupidity? Abundantly, yes. And did my mother ever forgive me? Well, I eventually had to come out of the pool. And let's just say that when I did, I learned a valuable lesson about consequences that no amount of swimming could save me from. You know, they say water has memory. If that pool could talk, it would probably testify against me. But it would also tell you that those Smith brothers, despite everything, despite the chaos, despite the near drownings and standoffs, loved each other fiercely. We just had a funny way of showing it, usually involving 7 feet of water and questionable decision making. That's all for today's episode of Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth. Join me next time when we'll explore another legendary tale from the Smith family archives, hopefully one with less water and fewer near-death experiences. Until then, remember, if someone tells you they can swim, maybe don't test that theory in the deep end. And if you're ever in a standoff with your mother at a swimming pool, brother, you've already lost. This has been Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth, where the truth is always stranger than fiction, and somehow we all survived to talk about it.